major issue this presidential election is the future of the Supreme Court. The next commander-in-chief could appoint several new justices. Here's how Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton say each would handle vacancies on the bench in CBS This Morning's ongoing series, Issues That Matter.
The kind of people that I would be looking to nominate to the court would be in the great tradition of standing up to the powerful, standing up on behalf of our rights as Americans.
The replacement of our beloved Justice Scalia will be a person of similar views, principles, and judicial philosophies. Very important.
I would hope that the Senate would do its job and confirm the nominee that President Obama has sent to them. That's the way the Constitution fundamentally should operate.
I think the next president should make the pick. I would be not in favor of going forward.
I strongly support Roe v. Wade. The government has no business in the decisions that women make with their families in accordance with their faith, with medical advice, and I will stand up for that right.
Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court.
Well, I support the Second Amendment. I think we need comprehensive background checks, need to close the online loophole, close the gun show loophole.
We need a Supreme Court that, in my opinion, is going to uphold the Second Amendment and all amendments, but the Second Amendment, which is under absolute siege.
The Supreme Court should represent all of us. That's how I see the court.
The Supreme Court, it's what it's all about.
For more on how the next president will impact the future of the court, David Boies, the chairman of the Boies, Schiller and Flexner law firm, and Ted Olson, who served as U.S. Solicitor General under President George W. Bush, good enough to join us. Opposing sides, of course, in the Bush versus Gore case that would ultimately decide the 2000 election. Later, partners in the fight to overturn Proposition 8, which upended California's ban on same-sex marriage. We should mention David Boies says he is voting for Hillary Clinton. Ted Olson has not announced his choice. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.
So very much to get to, but I do want to begin with something that has proved rather pervasive in the rhetoric of Donald Trump of late, the idea perhaps that the election could be rigged. Regardless of that, if we see a contested result in the aftermath of November 8th, how would the 2000 result, again, of which you were both a crucial part, inform what might happen next?
It might not inform it at all, because the election in 2000 dealt with some specific issues that went up to the court. You'd have to have a replication of those specific issues. To begin with, you'd have to have a very close election in a particular state. And you've got to have ballots that would determine the election that are somehow contested. That happens very rarely in presidential elections. So I think the chances of that being repeated, I think, are small. But it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Ted, what do you make of what has been called a very dangerous precedent that we've now seen? Rhetoric before an election speaking to the legitimacy, not just of it, but really of the democratic process.
Well, you sort of have to unpack all that rhetoric. What is being talked about? Mm-hmm. If someone's saying that I'm not going to agree with the outcome unless I see where the votes are and whether there's a close vote and whether there are procedures in every state for contesting an election, as we saw in Florida. Mm-hmm. Vice President Gore was perfectly within his rights, and his legal team were perfectly within their rights to challenge the outcome and to ask for a recount. Any candidate for office is within their rights to do that. Al Franken wouldn't be in the Senate if he hadn't done that in his Senate election in Minnesota. So this sort of thing can happen. But if you're talking about people corruptly determining the outcome of a presidential election, because of our system, that's essentially impossible to do.
Yeah.
Because people vote individually in states.
Let's look ahead to November 9th and beyond. So many issues, I suppose, to choose from. What are the biggest ones? In this last debate, of course, we heard discussion of Roe v. Wade. We heard discussion of the Second Amendment. But for both of you, what are the big issues, do you believe, that the court will face in the next term and moving forward?
Well, I think the issues that you identify are certainly among them. You're going to be looking at abortion rights. You're going to be looking at gun rights. You're going to be looking at voting rights. I think you may be revisiting some of the issues with respect to campaign finance regulations. So there are lots of critical issues that the court's going to face.
Something that Hillary Clinton has said, if she was elected president in her first 30 days, Ted, she would write an amendment to repeal Citizens United. That decision. What do you that that would be the first 30 days? That's pretty high on the list.
That would be a world record for getting a constitutional amendment. That's for sure. It's a very complicated process, as you know. And the Citizens United case, we could talk about it for a long time. That involved the First Amendment. How much freedom do individuals, either acting individually or collectively through a corporation or a labor union or something like that, how do they express themselves on political issues? That's a pretty important thing. So how you define what the government can control with respect to that is a very tricky issue. So I hear lots of people saying, I'm going to change the outcome of that case, but I haven't heard them say exactly how they're going to do that in a way that is consistent with the existing Constitution.
And it would be a decision for a court that, David, I know you just described it earlier this morning as a collegial body, one that does not necessarily give away how it might go. But now, with regard to this collective body, it is a body short at this point. Merrick Garland seemed, with regard to reviews of his nomination on both sides of the aisle, a reasonable nominee, has not yet received a vote. He's actually set a record now for the longest time elapsed between nomination and confirmation hearing. What do you make of the politics here?
I think it's very unfortunate. I think that Judge Garland is an exceptional jurist and should have been confirmed. But regardless of whether you agree with that proposition or not, I think almost everybody would agree that the Senate should have given him a vote. They should have made a decision. The President has an obligation to appoint. The Senate has an obligation to consider. And they can vote him up, they can vote him down. But to simply not act, I think, is a dereliction of duty.
A dangerous political precedent here?
I think it's a dangerous political precedent. What's been happening in the Senate with respect to Supreme Court and other judicial appointments over the last 20, 30 years or so is very unfortunate. Both sides have been guilty of preventing votes or voting against people who are highly qualified. Merrick Garland is a highly qualified person. And if we are going to respect the United States Supreme Court, we have to have a process that respects highly qualified individuals on either side of the political spectrum, or whoever they're appointed by the president. The Senate has to stop this. The American people have got to say to their senators, when you have a highly qualified person, and Merrick Garland is, you will have a vote, you will consider him, and you will vote on him on the merits. None of this 52-48 votes on senators who are, on candidates who are well qualified. We can't do that to the Supreme Court. And the American people don't like it.
We have seen then the politicizing and the resulting polarization of those politics impact the court with regard here specifically. So to remove it all then, just for the two of you, what sort of person, what sort of justice would you like to see appointed in the years to come?
Well, I think somebody like Judge Garland, who is experienced, thoughtful, collegial, somebody who I think is respected by Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, somebody who is going to interpret the law, doesn't have a strong political agenda. I think he is an excellent example. And one of the things that is disappointing is that when President Obama appointed somebody like that, the Senate didn't say, great, that's the direction we ought to be going. Let's confirm him quickly.
Well, you know, and also John Roberts was highly qualified, yet 24 senators voted against him. And Elena Kagan, you know, who was the dean of the Harvard Law School. The last few appointments to the Supreme Court, the justices who are there now, highly qualified people. They're appointed by different presidents of different political parties, but they're enormously well-qualified people. So we have plenty of those individuals in this country, and they're on the courts of appeals, or they're teaching, or they're practicing law. They have to be looked at on the merits and not constantly seen through the prism of politics all the time. That's very unfortunate.
And it just seems the danger of a deadlock and how unsatisfying a result that can really be.
And it means that some cases won't get decided at all, and they'll be decided. They will be decided, but not by the Supreme Court. They'll be decided by lower federal courts, because the decision there will be final, because the Supreme Court is divided.
And think what it would have been like in the marriage equality cases if you'd had a 4-4 division of the Supreme Court. You'd have a constitutional right for marriage equality in Virginia and California, but not in Ohio and Michigan. That doesn't make any sense.
At all. Yeah. Let's get 9.
Yeah.
Let's get a 9.
Right, yeah.
Can we all get together and figure out a way? It seems just so very easy. Gentlemen, boy, I wish I had hours. I do not. David and Ted cannot thank you enough for being with us.
It's good to be with you.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.